Welcome to the Tait Talks podcast. Yeah. Like and subscribe. Yeah, fucking yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 17 of the Tait Talks podcast. I'm the host, Tait Middleton. Today I am speaking to Sam Rowland. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tait. Great to be here, mate.
Thank you for coming out, mate. It's these scary COVID times.
Yes, well, hopefully we're at the worst of it, but we'll be vigilant as Captain Dan says.
That's it. We've got the 1.5 away from each other, so we're fine. There's no illusions here. Sam, you are a DJ.
Yes.
And also a lawyer.
Yes.
Today we're going to be talking about more of the DJ side, but we'll touch on the lawyer stuff.
Happy to follow your lead, mate.
When did you start being a DJ? How did it happen? How does one become a DJ?
So I found a range of music compilations that were advertised on TV back in sort of 2000, 2001.
Okay, yep.
And then my dad would buy a couple of them as like, you did well at school this term. Here's a CD. And then I started digging for different sorts of CDs that were similar to the ones I found, like Wild and Hard Energy and Central Energy, which are some Australian-based compilations. Found out a couple of friends at school in Year 9 were DJing, playing underage at a couple of places, but one of them gave me his old turntables when I was 17 and started from there and never looked back, really.
That's pretty cool. So he gave you the turntables?
Yeah, because he was upgrading to a different brand.
Yeah.
And he had turntables that were probably 4 or 5 years old. They were old belt drive ones, not the electric motor ones. So he said, well, I'm buying these Stantons, you can have these ones for, $200.
Yeah. And
he gave me, a dozen of his records to practice with before I could start ordering a few records. So I started on vinyl records.
Yep.
And, just started playing at home and gave the family hell for a few years before I started playing a few gigs.
Yeah. Playing at home, though, as you just said, it is loud. My brother used to do it when I was a kid, when I was around 10-ish, I reckon. And he had all the same CDs as you and Skits Mix and all those ones.
Skits Mix, absolutely.
And he...
Chancellor.
Yeah, with Drew. But he fucking... It was non-stop. It was non-stop, loud as fuck. Like, that's one of the big issues with being a DJ is it's loud.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I only had like a basic sort of Kenwood hi-fi system.
Yeah.
But I'd do it after school or after work when I finished school, and I really would just have it in my headphones, so I wouldn't really have it that loud, but I'd be stamping my feet along, and I was upstairs, and my sister doesn't like the music, and my brother, he's supportive but doesn't like the music, and mum and dad are like, I'm not sure about this music stuff you're doing, but they were really supportive and really encouraging of me practicing, because I started, I was classically trained as a piano player.
So that's your background.
So I had a background in there and did some exams in that. But then once I started DJing, the piano went down the wayside a little bit, and the DJing took over. So.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. How many gigs have you done now?
Over 150 in the last 13 years. Probably a few more, because there's a couple of gigs I did for like some uni parties and a couple of private things, but in terms of playing the harder styles of dance music, it's 155.
So you're at 155. Can you remember gig one?
Yes, it's actually in Geelong.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So years and years ago, there was a party called Reactive. It was at Static.
Okay.
Which I think is now St James or whatever it is. Across from Beeves Bar, just
up
towards Irish Street.
Yeah, I'm with you. The one that goes on for like wee hours in the morning.
That's right. Yeah.
It's the only place to drink apart from strip clubs. Yeah.
So back in the day, there was Room 99, there was Eureka, then Foreplay came along, which was sort of the electro house music, which I liked but didn't really play. But a couple of the friends who got me into DJing from high school, and the one who gave me his decks, they were playing at Static. It was a Friday night gig, and a few of the people who ran that party went to Melbourne one evening, and my friend Nathan said, why don't you come have your first gig? And so that was my first one. I think it was June 2006.
Are you nervous?
I was nervous.
Yeah.
I probably still am at varying levels.
Yeah.
For all the gigs now, because they're all different.
Yeah, true. What's the worst thing that can go wrong for DJ? For yourself, not so much the power goes out, more like you fuck up.
Yeah, well, back in the days when I started on turntables with vinyl,
Yeah.
it was if you were jumping around too much and the needle skipped.
Yeah, okay.
Which I did quite a few times.
Yeah.
Because I got too excited. And when I had gigs, they were on the Technics turntables, which are industry standard, and I'd never used them before the gig. So the pitch control's harder to use, and if you get excited and the needle skips, I'm like, oh, okay, I wasn't quite ready to mix, or it might skip a minute or two into the track. And then CDJs sort of came in to start being used probably 2008-9 when I was playing in Melbourne, and it was more you're queuing up, say, the left-hand CDJ with the cue button, but you actually press the one that's already playing.
Okay.
And then the music stops, so you press, cue. I'm like, oh, bugger. So I haven't pressed the one I'm thinking of getting in my earphones.
Yeah.
I've stopped the one that the crowd's doing. So there's 30 seconds of silence, and you get the, ooh, fat loser, what are you doing?
Does that happen, like, do you see that?
It's a rite of passage. Everyone does it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's kind of like in stand-up, forgetting your lines or something like that. It's just, it happens. It's going to happen as long as you're doing it.
And you can be as careful and as focused as you possibly can, but the first time I actually knocked the cue button was at a DJ comp in 2014 for a spot at DEFCON 1 festival in front of the head of Q Dance Australia and a big artist called Audio Freak who was from Sydney, and doing it in front of them, I'm like, oh well,
yeah,
I wasn't going to win anyway, so I just kept going. So, yeah. But and I suppose the other thing is, like, when you're trying to beat match the songs at the same time, if it's like sort of completely out of whack, it's called a train wreck, I guess. So, everybody train wrecks, so you can't judge people too harshly. So,
oh yeah, it's just bold.
Well, you can, but you'd be a dick if you did.
It's true. It's people who haven't done it before.
Oh look, everybody's like, even the most experienced guys. If they're playing a song for the first time, it might have a long intro, it might have a short one, or it might have like a false drop of like 4 beats of silence before the next part of the intro. So, we're all human.
Yeah, I mean, even surgeons and stuff like that. It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
There are issues.
What's considered a bad gig? I get a bad gig in stand-up because we're going for a sound and that is laughter. If you're not getting laughs, you're failing. There's no, that's it. But whereas in, like, the DJ world and stuff like that, how do you know if you've had a bad gig?
Well, it can vary, because, like, I can feel like I've had a bad gig, but the promoter likes it, or I can feel like I've played well and the promoter's like, you played too hard, or you didn't play enough tracks that people knew, or if you were playing at the end of the night, you played something that the people didn't like and they left early. So if there's someone after you, you've cleared the floor before they start, which we've done a couple of times. Or the flip side, if you're playing early in the night, if you're playing and you don't bring enough of the crowd in by the time you finish, so they can start drinking and whatever else. Those are the sort of things that sort of constitute a bad gig.
How do you make sure you're not so with your gigs and stuff like that, you do solo, or you do it 1 hour?
It's mostly solo and mostly 1 hour. Sometimes 30 minutes, 45 minutes, depending on how many people are on a lineup. So, and I don't mind playing with other people as well, but I prefer to play with people who I know or have a similar sort of style to me. Because some people like to play, like I play sort of 155 BPM pretty much the whole way through.
Yeah.
Some people like to play at 150 and don't really change the pitch of the songs. Some people play quite fast, and you have to sort of find the happy medium.
So that's when you're talking about now, is that like I'm standing here doing DJ stuff, you're standing there doing it? Or is it like you're doing your hour and then the next person's doing a faster set?
Yeah, so sometimes they can be faster after me, sometimes they can be faster before. Yeah. So there used to be a structure of like you'd build it up over the night.
Yeah.
It's not so much of a spoken rule or unspoken rule about styles anymore. Like you've got more flexibility to do whatever you want, but when you started, if you played at first gig, you'd be expected to play like sort of trance music at 140, and if you didn't play trance music, then you probably didn't get the first gig. So like people who tried to break through and say, I play hardstyle music at 150, 155, they said, yep, that's good. In order to get to that point, you're going to have to play a couple of other genres to make sure we see that you're flexible and you can bring some people. But that's more like a 10-year. It was like the late 2000s, early 2010s. That was sort of important. Now it's more like, well, if you bring a crowd and you're good at what you do, it doesn't matter what you do.
It's good, I guess.
I think it is better now. There's less
Yeah.
pressure on people to feel like they have to play things that they don't like.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good development that's taken place in the last 10 years in terms of the hard styles.
Have you seen much of a difference in nightclubs from like when you started to now? You know, are they better run, or are they?
I think the production in terms of like stages and equipment and stuff is certainly far more advanced
Yeah.
than back in the days.
Yeah.
Now
Does that make it easier? Sorry.
It does.
Yeah.
But look, at the end of the day, you've got to be good at what you do, and you've got to be confident that you can fulfil the role that the promoter wants you to play. Because, like, you know, you might have 5 promoters in Melbourne that you play for, but all of them have subtle differences as to what they expect or what they like or what they tolerate.
Yeah.
So, you always want to approach each gig on its merits and not go, I played that gig 2 weeks ago, it'll fit for this other promoter, I'll just do something similar.
Okay.
That might not be the case.
Yeah.
And time slots are also important, like going full on at 11 o'clock in the evening, and then by the time the headliners come on at 1 or 2, the crowd's tired because you played faster music, and now they're tired and they don't watch the headliner. I'm like, well, your job's not to be the headliner if you're playing at 11.
Yeah.
So you've got to play your role.
That's it. Like, yeah, it's very interesting. Like, I never even thought of that. I thought it was just do your thing, but like, yeah, it's a progression from
like it's more in the sort of do your thing side now, but there's still that sort of progression. And a lot of the people who've been running, there's people who've been running parties for 15, 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
They have expectations, but then there's people who've just sort of started doing them, and they just like, mate, we'll have 10 gigs, 10 sets of the same thing on an event, for example. We don't care if the punters who come to a particular event want to hear 5 hours of 160, then they'll get 5 hours of 160. If they want to hear 5 hours of hardcore at 200 BPM, that's what they'll get. So
you do have to be flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you do gigs, so do you always use their equipment?
Yeah, that's right. So
Okay.
they'll have, like, especially nowadays, they'll have, like, 2 or 3 or 4 CDJs.
Yeah.
They'll have the mixer. You just basically bring your headphones and your USB, and that's all there is to it. As
Yeah.
opposed to back in the days, you're
Like
carrying lugging crates full of vinyl.
Yeah.
I think the first gig I had, it was actually a milk crate that I had all my vinyls in.
I think my brother had that too.
I actually nicked it from my job in the supermarket, and I'm like, and my friend said, "Oh, we probably need to get you a case for your vinyls." So they got me one after that first gig. Well, actually after the second one in Geelong. So
It's just more a rite of passage again, though, isn't it? Just have
absolutely.
the milk crates. It seemed to be like that cool thing.
And especially like if you played a good gig but you were tired from jumping around. And I used to play at a place called 3D in Melbourne on just down the bottom of Burke Street before the mall. We always walk back up the hill and park a few blocks away near the train station.
Lugging your shit.
You've jumped around for an hour, you've been watching 2 or 3 other people before you, you're having a dance or whatever it is, and you're tired from fist pumping, and you've got to lug your crates back to the car. And you're like, okay, now I've got to drive home, get a couple of Red Bulls to get home or whatever else. So, but now it's like, some people just keep it in their pocket and walk in with their headphones around their neck. So it's pretty straightforward. The youngins don't know what they're missing from back in the day.
It's the same as like trades and stuff though. Like everything used to be cast iron back in the day and weighed an absolute fucking ton, and now it's just everything's lightweight, like a PVC pipe and shit like that. So everything you got to go with the times, I guess. Makes life a lot easier, I guess.
Yeah, so it's sort of evolved from bringing vinyl, then everyone just went to CDs.
Yeah.
And then when they changed the Pioneer CDJ 1000 to 2000s, you could have like a USB port or even like an SD card.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where you could link the CDJs. So you had like a modem cord, so you only had to bring one USB.
Okay.
Although I always bring one USB for each CDJ.
Yeah.
Because as much as I trust the link function, I never rely on it again.
Yeah, true.
But it always makes it interesting. Like I watch other people, they bring one USB and they're trying to make sure that they stop the right player and put the CD, in the right spot, and sometimes you stop the music all of a sudden. But if I've got one USB in each one, I'm like, okay, that one I'm not using.
Yep.
Take that one out, get ready, and then I'll take the others out when I finish, and then off you go. So there's no
confusion
or fuck up, I guess.
Yeah, it's a total different world to anything that I really know, to be honest. The one thing that's always got me is How do you make sure your ears do not explode?
I suppose people would say, or people that know me would say I'm pretty deaf as it is.
Okay.
But
Do you think that's related to DJ stuff?
yeah, I don't think I'm not. I can hear fine. Like, I don't wear earplugs all that often. But when I'm DJing, the person before me will have the sound all the way up in their earphones. I barely have it, halfway up because I rely on the monitors, the speakers, but then also in the crowd. But I have just the volume in my earphones pretty quiet at home and just do the same with the gig. And I mean, the sound's loud. If you can't work off the sound in the room, then you've got an issue, I guess. But I don't know what you hear when you have it full ball. So it's just distorted as all hell.
Do you prefer festivals or would you rather nightclub?
I prefer a nightclub,
Nightclub.
I haven't done a lot of festivals, probably. I should have thought of this before you asked me. I think I've done 6 or 7 festivals. But they're like, most of them have actually been intense, not like an outdoor stage. I think only one of them was an outdoor stage, which was DEFCON 1 in Sydney in 2016. But clubs are all I've known. They've given me all my favourite memories, so I feel more comfortable in a club. I can see everybody in the room and I can see if someone's not quite feeling it. So whereas like at a festival, if there's an abyss of people, I don't know if the people at the back are liking it, I'm never going to know. So, but I prefer the clubs.
Do you get any perks from like when you're at a at a nightclub? Are they like, here's drink cards, or you can get 10 free people in, or whatever? Yeah,
drink cards are you certainly get plenty of them. You usually get to bring one guest for free. Sometimes 2, just depending on the night itself or the generosity of the promoter or the nightclub itself. But I don't play for perks, but it's very nice of people to do that.
When you started, can you remember has it been paid gigs from the beginning?
Yeah, pretty much. There's only been maybe a dozen that have not been paid. And some of them we've just agreed upon it because it's like a small gig. Like sometimes there's been a couple of upcoming promoters just happy to play for free to get them off the ground. But then obviously the next time you go in with the rate you want. But most of the time it's like, well, we'll give you this. And you're like, oh, well, there's not a lot of room for bartering. But I suppose since I started as the principal, because I had a previous alias before I started that called DJ Practice, it was more get paid whatever you're told. So that's the principle. I'm like, well, I've had a few bigger gigs and asked for a little bit more money, and most people are pretty happy with that. So I don't feel like it's appropriate for me to barter because I'm not like a full-on producer as well as a DJ. So if someone's producing and they're travelling the country a bit more often, then they can sort of get the $500,000 gigs. Me, happy $100. Back in the day, as long as I had a bit of money to stop at KFC before the Westgate and get some fuel, I was sorted. So I used to get like sort of $50 a gig, and one night they said, "Oh, we've had a bit of a quiet night, Sam, can we just give you $25?" I'm like, it's no big deal. It doesn't matter. I'm going to get a 2-piece feed on the way home, and I put $10 of fuel in the car, and I'm happy. I'm going to get home safe. So don't feel bad.
There's more like, I suppose, the experience and the exposure that those gigs can get you potentially.
Exactly. It's important to have a good work ethic and be easy to work with. Because there's people who feel like they're entitled to things, and look, maybe they are. But if someone's easier to work with than someone else, the person who's easy to work with might get more of the gigs. So I feel like that's an advantage. I'm happy to go with the flow. Like, it's a hobby. It's one I take very seriously, but at the end of the day, it's still just a hobby.
So at entry level position when you first started, is it, well, probably not when the very beginning, but is it around the 50 to 100? So it's an hour?
It's mostly an hour. Whether you're playing with someone for the whole time, like I mix one track, they come in, mix the next track, we take it in turns. Or you might do 2 songs each, or do 20-minute spells each, or whatever it is. But $50 to $100 to start with. You get a $20 drink credit or 2 cards. You get to bring a friend in for free. I think it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I mean, you enjoy.
especially for your first couple of years.
Yeah, you enjoy doing it too.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of mates who I know are in bands who spend thousands of dollars on equipment, and lug everything there, and they're like, one palmy between four of us. Or something, you know, whatever. I mean, something fun.
And it's a small one.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like it's
Not one of those ones on steroids.
Yeah, you know, that holy chicken type style. But it's very. People will try and extort.
And look, fair play to that. If you can get it, then by all means.
Yeah.
Like, and now since I've been doing it for over 10 years, like I've played a bit interstate, and I've said, well, because a lot of people who play and stuff, you've got to pay for my flights to get there, and you've got to pay for a hotel. Me, I'm like, if you pay one of them, I'll do the other. It's no big deal.
Okay.
So, actually, I played in Canberra a couple of times. I drove up.
Yep.
I said, I'll make my own way there. You just pay the fee and just find a shit hotel. I was like, oh, no, we've got a deal. We'll put you in a good hotel. Because one of the guys who actually used to run the events up there, he was a chef at one of the hotels and got like half price for rooms. So, that was very nice.
You've done Canberra a few times.
Yep.
You said you did Sydney. Was it DEF CON?
Yep, that's right. So DEF CON 1 is a festival run by Q-Dance in Holland, and they've been doing that since 2003, and they brought it to Australia in 2009.
Yep.
I tried to play there 2010 and 11 playing hardcore music because I ditched hardstyle for a couple of years and played hardcore, which is about between like sort of the GABA 160 to 180 BPM hardcore. Didn't have any success, and then it was actually funny. I got that gig 2 days after I retired my old alias.
Yeah.
So I went online and said I'm going to wrap up DJ practice, and then we had an event in Melbourne. I did some artist liaison work for at Festival Hall.
Yeah.
Company Hard Candy in Melbourne. They joined up with a few other companies. HSU in Sydney. Did an event at Festival Hall. I did like the artist running around, driving them from the hotel, getting on stage and stuff. And the guy from Q-Dance said, "Oh, Sam, we want you to come play with Daniel, DJ Chemical, and play on the blue stage." I'm like, "Oh, okay. I might not retire just yet." But at that time, I was already planning like a bit of a softer version of the hardstyle.
Yeah.
And obviously, the principle.
Yeah.
Shameless plug.
Yeah.
I said, "I'm doing a new project soon," but they said, "Oh, well, you can have your swan song as practice, then you can do your new alias." So, because I played in Sydney at a few other events and things since 2012.
Yeah.
A couple of friends had run a few events, and there was a few other promoters up there. I had a couple of goes with them too. So, but then I played the festival. That was in front of like 2,000 people. It's still my biggest gig.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll never play to a bigger crowd than
2,000 people.
Yeah. At 6:30 as the sun was setting. It's at the Regatta Centre, so by the water. It was pretty surreal.
Yeah.
Playing after.
Made it.
Yeah. So there's a pretty famous Dutch guy called Randy who was playing before us, and he's really popular. And there was another Dutch lady, her name's Detox. She was after us, and she was up and coming at the time. So playing right between them, I'm like, oh God, I don't feel like we deserve the 6:30 spot. I would have been happy to play first at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh no, because like there's going to be someone on the main stage. We just want to change it up, and the Melbourne thing, people are going to like that. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, no worries. So we did a few special remixes of things for the set, and it was emotional because I'd been DJ practice since 2000 at school. Two of my mates who liked the CDs I did, we sort of gave each other DJ names even though we weren't DJing, because like we'd like record songs off the radio and give each other a mixtape.
Yeah, get it.
So it was hard to let go because it was a big part of who I was, but I'm like, I need to try something different.
Yeah.
So I started the concept of the principal, and the principal's the head of a law firm as well as a school, but everyone says, oh, Sam, class is in session. I'm like, no, the wrong kind of principal. It's like head of a law firm. So
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I was just about to say, well, how did you get that? But that makes sense.
And a lot of the mates in Sydney go, oh, Sam, next gig, give us detention. I'm like, no, that's not what... I'll take it, I don't care. So I'm like, I should make a track called Give Me Detention.
Yeah.
So I might still do that. But head of a law firm, that's sort of where it came from. And like I wear a suit jacket when I play.
Oh, okay.
So that's cool. But that's how it started.
Yeah. So we said you've done Canberra, you've done Sydney. I think you said, you told me you've done Brisbane?
Gold Coast.
Gold Coast.
Which wasn't booked, but a friend was playing and he invited me up for the last half.
Yeah.
So that was cool. And that's it in Australia.
Now, overseas.
Yes.
You have been lucky enough.
Very lucky.
Actually, just rewind for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I know you just told me about you got a gig through a friend, the last one in Gold Coast. How do you get the gigs in Sydney? And do you have a manager at all? Or have you had a manager?
I suppose you could say my wife's my manager,
Okay.
but she makes sure I do all the right things. But no, I don't have a formal manager.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people in Australia do. But I suppose in terms of getting the gigs in Sydney, it was through.
Well, just gigs in general.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, back in the day, there was a lot of internet forums.
Yeah.
And each sort of event had their own forum.
Yeah.
And there was one global one called Global Hardstyle, and there were people all over Europe and all over Australia, New Zealand, some in America, not too much because America's not into it too much. But I just post some mixes once I started recording them after I started DJing and had the first couple of gigs in Geelong. And after I did that, post them on the forum. There was a guy in Melbourne who ran 3D and said, "Oh, Sam, as you know, we play more trance music. We're going to give hardstyle a go, and we want you to play on the first hardstyle event." And then a few other friends from our forum, they started playing. They did a weekly hardstyle level because there were 3 levels on the club.
Yep.
First was like sort of trance music and a bit of house music. Second level was like anything. One week it could be drum and bass. Next week it'd be like psytrance. Next week it'd be like gothic, darkcore, metal. And then the third level would be hardstyle.
Yeah.
And a lot of our friends on the forum in Melbourne started from there, and on that forum there were people from Sydney, so they came down to meet us. We went up to their parties, and then just spread like wildfire. So we all looked after each other as best we can.
That's pretty cool.
So like the people who booked me in Sydney, I've done my best to make sure that if I give them a gig, then I can, or if I can't do it personally, one of the other promoters in Melbourne can return the favour.
Yeah. So it's all about who you know.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And as long as you're not being a jerk.
Yes, I think, as you said, the easier you are to work with anything.
You're going to go a long way.
Yeah. And you're going to have a little bit of talent, let's be honest.
Exactly.
Just going to pause here. We'll be right back. We were just talking about overseas. Where do we land on that? Where have you been overseas?
So,
what was the first gig?
The first gig was in the Netherlands in 2014 at a small little town called Rowland, which is about 40 minutes from the German border on the east side of the country. Yeah. And there's like a big, 4,000 capacity nightclub in the middle of the town called Lucky Club.
Yeah.
And
they just love it, do they?
They love it. Like the Netherlands is home for hardstyle.
Okay.
And it's obviously home for hardcore. In the 90s they had Thunderdome and hardcore music. Then they sort of got over hardcore in the 98, 99.
Yeah.
Because it was too happy, too commercial. And then they started making some sort of slower version of hardcore that had trance elements. It's hardstyle. So they've loved it forever. Obviously with the Q-Dance, that's the biggest company over there. And there's like 1,000 other companies who do events every week.
Yeah.
And in that forum I was talking about global hardstyle, there was a guy called Emil who was an artist director at this Lucky Club. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Oh Sam, we know you're coming to Europe for a couple of festivals," because one of the festivals we were going to, there was a mate from Melbourne making his debut along with his mate who ran a label, and he was from Newcastle, who'd moved over to Holland. So we were going in April 2014, and the guy said, "Are you here on this date?" I said, "Yeah, that's 2 days before the first gig." He goes, "Good, you're going to come play with us." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, we're doing this party, and there's a DJ comp, but we're just going to put you on as one of the winners, and you can just play second gig, and can't pay you, of course, because there's obviously rules with like income overseas. So I haven't been paid for any overseas gigs, but didn't care. I got to play whatever I wanted. So played at this beautiful venue in the Lucky Club in Rowland. It's basically like Ararat with a nightclub in it. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that went really well. The people at the club were really happy with it. Same time, 2 years later, the same people said, "Oh, you're coming back for the same festival you went to 2 years ago. You want another gig?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, no worries."
Yeah. It
was supporting a friend of mine, Renee, his name's Digital Punk, pretty big artist in Europe, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, I know Sam, yeah, chuck him on, it's all good." I'm like, "Oh, I've only met you twice for 5 minutes, but that's cool." So played same place again in April 2016, The year after that, the same people were doing a festival at another town 10 minutes further east.
Yeah.
It was called Boulevard Outdoor, and it was like a 6-stage festival. One was like commercial Dutch pop music, one was house music, one was psytrance, and then they had a big hardstyle tent. And they said, Sam, come and play at the festival there. Again, can't pay you. And I'm like, I don't care, it's a Dutch festival.
Yeah.
Everyone in Australia who plays the hardest styles will give their left nut to play at a festival. So, you know, it was early in the day, so it wasn't a lot of people, but it was a huge setup, and they had like fire guns and lasers, and yeah, it felt pretty damn cool. So they're the 3 I've had in Holland, but I've also played in Paris too.
Paris? What was that? What year?
2018.
Oh, so still fairly recent.
Yeah, so there was a guy who came to watch my DEF CON gig in Sydney, again from the forum.
Yeah.
We all know people from the forums. And his name was Pierre, and he started working with a company called Hard Pulse. And I said, we're going to Rebirth Festival, which is a festival we've been to like 4 times out of the last 6 years.
Yep.
He said, are you going to Paris? I'm like, well, no, we were going to see a friend of mine in Scotland who I went to school with and staying with him for a few days. Then we were going to Holland for the parties and then going home. He's like, if you can make it to Paris on this Friday night, we'll give you a gig. I'm like, okay. So I said to my wife, Chrissy, can we get to Paris? She's like, if you pay for the flights, we'll get there. I'm like, oh, that's fine. So we went to Scotland, flew to Paris on the Friday night, and then we got the train to Belgium the next day to a friend's house who was playing at the Rebirth Festival, and we went to the festival, but played at a very interesting nightclub near the Louvre in Paris, like 2 levels underground, and the French people were just nuts. Like, they're screaming every track, like none of them like, oh, you're from Australia, that's cool. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't speak much French. And there's probably like 250 people there, rammed, like, couldn't have that in COVID times. There was such thing as social distancing, but it's a big highlight for me to have done that, and the reception was really, really nice.
That sounds pretty awesome. Something that you've enjoyed. You've gone from your mate giving you, some freebie
In Geelong.
and now you're doing Paris.
And once I did Paris, I think some of the people in Australia are like, oh, okay, the principal idea kind of works. So since I've had the Paris gig, I've had 45 gigs in Australia.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So it really does.
It really helped.
Okay.
And
It's the version of like a viral video for a comedian.
I think it's because like 2 days after the gig, while I was in Holland, I got a message from some of the promoters in Melbourne who I played for a couple of times, but not much. And they said, oh, Sam, can you come play this gig? I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. I haven't heard from you for a couple of years, but that's cool.
Yeah.
And from there, it's just fired away.
Is it pretty incestuous and everyone knows everyone?
Pretty, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing because I think it's a really good community. We're really dedicated. We're really supportive of new names, existing names, different styles. Especially in the last 2 years in Australia, everyone's become really open-minded. Everyone's playing, open to playing different sort of stuff. I like to stick to my circle and not really cut into what other people do. And they sort of, reciprocate. Like, you sort of have the zone you stick to, but if you want to wander and play different sort of stuff, you can. So and the producers are using like psytrance bass lines in tracks at 155, or they have like a track breakdown, or there's a bit more singing, like sort of like the pop song structure is coming into hardstyle, like it's a big breakdown with like violins and choirs and like a really cool vocal.
Get you on the piano, mate.
As long as I've got sheet music I can read, I'd be fine. It'd take a long time to get back to scratch, but the diversity in the harder styles in the last 5 years is as much as it's ever been. It's not for everybody. Like, people who liked hardstyle 15 years ago don't really like it now, unless you're like really open-minded. But if you were a fanatic back in the days, you probably gave it away 5-10 years ago because it just wasn't what you liked.
Yeah, so it's changed a fair bit.
It changes every year.
Yeah.
It changes every half a year sometimes.
I suppose it's just fashion, isn't it?
Well,
just wanted to like that.
The shelf life of a song, to me, is about a month now.
Yeah.
Like, it comes out, comes on Spotify, when we weren't in COVID, and people were playing, like, whether you were the artist releasing it yourself or someone else was playing it after they bought it, of course.
Yeah.
You'd play for 2 or 3 gigs, and then unless it's a big hit, people would be like, "Oh yeah, I've heard that before."
Yeah.
So they want, where's the next one?
Yeah. True.
So the turnover of tracks is way more than they used to.
Yeah.
And I think because you don't have to wait for a vinyl pressing anymore, you can just pump tracks out every week. Like labels used to be like, well, we do 2 releases a month and this is your turn. Now it's like, well, we've got all these tracks, we'll just do 3 on this day, 1 on a Thursday, 2 next week. The volume of music is crazy in the digital age.
Yeah.
For better or for worse.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have variations of everything. But, I mean, it's if you're out there thinking about doing a podcast, don't, because there's too much competition already.
But then again, if you love what you're doing and you believe in what you're doing, it doesn't matter if unless you want to like make a lot of money off it. But if you just want to do it to have
That's
a
the dream.
I'm paying Tait $200 to be here, by the way. So, but if you're just happy to get a few plays on SoundCloud and you like what you're doing and you're able to commit to it, then there's no reason not to start.
There's got to be a passion in pretty much everything, to be honest.
Yeah.
Not just do it because you're like, everyone else is doing it. Yes, I'll give it a shot. You're probably going to have a natural curiosity to...
And it comes back to the dedication of the people who are playing, but also the fans as well. Like, you know, I listen to like hundreds of podcasts, whether they're people I know, people overseas, every week scrolling through SoundCloud or YouTube, like, oh, there's that person, they do a podcast. So there's a lot to keep up with.
Fashion.
Yeah.
Fashionable now to get podcasts. Everyone's got something to say.
Exactly. And then people have, you know, their Instagram stories and TikTok, which I don't know anything about, but no, I'm probably too old for TikTok.
Do you have any weird stories? Any just...
Not many, but I have a good one from my Canberra gigs.
Yep.
So the place I played at was actually a gay club.
Okay.
And it was a really nice setup, but it had like the poles in the middle for like, you know, bumping and grinding. I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool. So I played in Canberra the first time in 2015, and they were only just starting to play the harder styles. And like the people who were there all over it, but there was a few sort of like the regulars who just go to like whatever clubs are open.
Yep.
And this girl comes up to be in the gig, sort of halfway through, and she said, "Oh, you're playing, your music's a bit hard and evil. You got anything sort of fun?" I'm like, "Well, only a little bit." She's like, "You got any Taylor Swift?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "I'll give you $10." I'm like, "If you make it 50, I'll play Taylor Swift." Now, I clearly didn't have any Taylor Swift, but I didn't think she'd come back with the extra 40. 20 minutes later, "Well, I found the money." I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I've checked my USBs. I don't have Taylor Swift, and I even brought CDs, and I haven't. I'm so sorry. Keep your money, please. And she got shitty and walked off. I'm like, well, you've heard a little doof from the street.
Yeah.
If you want to call it that, for 4 hours. Doesn't sound like the kind of night Taylor Swift's gonna feature. Yeah.
It's so weird that people think they can just be like, hey, play this. You're like, that's not how it works.
But then there's the next level again. It's like, oh, hey, can I come and spin the disc, or can I press play? I'm like, I really suggest you don't do that.
I'm married, alright?
Well, it's not even that. But it's more, I don't like requests.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't. At the same time, it's like...
But some people love it.
Yeah.
But even like requests in like the same sort of genre, I'm like, no, I'm here to play what I want to play, and you know that might sound a bit like, you know, fuck you, not flexible. I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to be like the jukebox and say, oh, hey, play the latest hardstyle remix of Sandstorm, or you know, I don't know if you heard of Showtech, FTS Fuck the System, probably the biggest hardstyle track ever. I'm like, I'd prefer not to play just the biggest hits, because there've been plenty of people over the years who are starting. And they maybe play first or second set, and they play every big possible hardstyle hit. I'm like, what are the rest of the guys meant to do for the night? And they're like, well, go away for a couple of months, think about what you've done, and then maybe come back when you're ready to have a bit of versatility.
That's what I was going to say. Is there unwritten rules? So stand up, like plagiarism, or breaking that down to simpler is stealing someone's joke is the worst thing you can do.
Well,
so if you're a DJ,
it's not necessarily stealing. I'll come back to stealing. It's not really the right word, but there. How do I describe it? Lots of festivals have the music recorded, and like they split it up and say, "Oh, here's Headhunters, he played his set. Here's Donkey Rollers, they played their set. And like, if a song's not released, people really want to play stuff unreleased. It's like, oh, Johnny was the first person to play this song. He's really cool. He must have all this cool new shit. But one person I played at a gig in Sydney in 2010, and the guy before me, he played a song that wasn't released, and it was cut out from a set, and I could recognise the set because it's one I liked a lot from sort of 3-4 months earlier, and it had the MC of that event talking over the song, and I'm like, you've just chopped this from the set. Why did you do that?
Yeah, so that type of stuff's obviously there.
Yeah, and look, the big thing is also, like, back in the day it was more like download off LimeWire or Juarez.
Kazaa.
Yeah, Kazaa, exactly. But there are places where you can legally buy the music.
Yep.
And realistically, the copyright doesn't mean you can play it in a club, but at least you've bought the song off like the website, and then you play it. Some people just don't buy any of the songs. And look, that's frowned upon, but maybe not as much as back in the day.
So I was going to ask, so when you play someone else's song, or you mix it up, mash it up, whatever you fucking call it, are you allowed to legally do that?
It's probably a 50-50 grey area. When I buy, there's a couple of websites I use. One's Beatport, one's Juno Download, based out of the UK, and then there's a Dutch-based one called Hardstyle.com, which is actually run by one of the big labels in Holland called Scantrax, but they sell all the other labels. Realistically, I am a lawyer, but this isn't probably correct, nor is it legal advice.
Exactly what we said for Elliot last time.
Yeah, thanks Elliot for the hookup, by the way.
None of this is fucking legal advice.
Basically, you can use it. It's sort of like buying a DVD.
Okay.
It's probably the best way. You can play it at home, and you know how they have the warning at the front. It's like it's for private use only.
Yeah.
And you can't use it at like a drive, whatever, or use it for commercial gain. So it's more like you can buy the song, you listen to it at home, you can play it at home, but realistically, if you're going to play that song at a club, what realistically should happen is the club should have like a list of, like, you need to write down the songs you play, and they submit it to, say, APRA, so that the label or the artist or whatever combo get the royalties the club can say. So like with DEFCON 1 in Sydney, we had to tell them our set list 2 weeks in advance so they could make sure that if there were songs on labels, the labels were told, the appropriate amount of royalties were paid. It might have been like 5 cents or something, or it might have been 20, I don't know what it is.
Can they say no? Can they no, we don't want to be associated with whatever, like the actual people who make the music?
No, they can't really say. I mean, once they put something out there, it's out there. Especially if it's released on a label and people can buy it.
Yeah. But
the alternative is people can, like, whether someone's signed to a label or not, they might just go, hey, here's my new song. You can download it from SoundCloud, or you can download it. Here's a Dropbox link for it. It might be like a bootleg, or it might be just something that they want to get out there to help promote them, and then a label might find them after that. So, I mean, once the song's out there, it's out there.
It's fair. I always wondered that. I always wondered when someone did a mashup, if it took off for some reason, and a radio station started playing it. I'm like, who the fuck? Like, where does the royalties go?
Yeah, and look, there's like people who make songs, but they take like a famous vocal, like Randy, who I spoke about earlier. He's a good friend of mine. 4 years ago actually, he made a version of Zombie by Cranberries, and he obviously started playing it, and then got it. You say you get it cleared for release. So, like, say you've got to go talk, I think, is it EMI or whoever the Cranberries are with, they say, well, this person's wanting to release the song on this label, and we'll pay you whatever percentage of royalties per stream, 100,000 streams on YouTube or whatever else, and then if you can't get it cleared, then you can't release it on a label, because, say, like, Warner Brothers or Universal Music, like, well, we really have the copyright to the lyrics and the melody and the tune, so you can't use it. Even though you've got a different melody or whatever it is, it's a different song title, you don't have permission, and we're not going to clear it.
Yeah. Okay.
It's probably not the best way to describe it.
No, that makes sense. With all this crap of COVID-19, obviously nightclubs are bumper to bumper. Like, you're touching each other. Not my cup of tea, but what's your honest thoughts on the industry? Like,
honestly, it's in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
I think it's in a lot of trouble. I know it's a bit of a doomsday sort of thing, but
Well, it's literally like to dance with someone, you are touching them pretty much.
Yeah,
You're near them. Like, it's not like 1.5.
well, I had a couple of gigs at Chase's nightclub on Chapel Street in Melbourne this year with PhD, Pure Hard Dance. Shouts to Brendan and Dean. We had like 1,000 at one of the gigs, and there was maybe 450 at the other one.
Yeah.
And we were all up and about, jumping into each other and fist pumping.
And that's why people like it. Like,
Yeah.
You got to be that.
So obviously nothing's going on in Melbourne right now, and look, I don't think it will for many months. Sydney have started to try and do a couple of like sit-down gigs, so you have like a table with like 4 people, and you can't stand up and dance. You can dance it on the chair.
Yeah.
If you want to get up and get a drink, you can, because they don't really have masks in that much in Sydney. So a couple of people have done some of that, and I think there's the idea maybe you just like have essentially people turn up at a pub but someone plays 3 hours of music.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of that going on.
Yeah.
Perth have still got gigs.
Yeah.
Fuck you, Perth. I mean, sorry. Sorry, Mark McGowan.
But yeah, it's going to be hard.
It
like,
is.
At least you stand up and sit down, and you can just go a seat in between everyone. Take it out. But whereas people enjoy the DJ or the nightclub scene is, I want to dance, I want to fucking jump around, I want to be near people, we getting a sweat up.
And look, I suppose you can't sort of speculate about it too much because we just don't know what next month's going to look like, what January's going to look like, what Easter's going to look like. My gut feeling's not great, but we're going to get something moving quicker in Australia, better than Europe, with 120,000 cases a day in Europe. I mean, the big festival season in Europe is April to September. They had nothing this year.
Yeah.
I reckon they'll have nothing next year.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll be going back to Europe for probably 4 years. And it cuts me up, because I've been the last 7 years. It's part of who we are, and we've got heaps of friends over there, like big artists, friends, fans, people who work at the events.
Yeah.
It's crushing to see them. Like, they're obviously releasing tracks and they have Spotify views and whatever, but not all of them do.
Yeah.
Some of them have flourished in this period, and they're really productive in the studio. They're not touring. They just have a really solid structure during the week. Some of them are like, well, without gigs, I have no motivation.
Yeah.
So I haven't released a track since April.
Yeah.
So there's no right or wrong way to do it, but I worry about everybody, to be honest. And I worry about the young guys that I was telling you about before we started the chat, because there's people across Australia who are in their early 20s. They're signed to labels, whether they're here or in Europe. Some of them would have been travelling to Europe to play in the festival season, and they haven't. And for me, when gigs start up again, it's not even about me having 15, 20 gigs a year. I'm happy with just a couple, but I want them to have, in essence, what they should have had this year. Because they've done a lot of hard yard. This was something that some of them were going to break out this year. Yeah. And that's upsetting, because some of them are my really close friends, and whatever I can do to help them, that's going to be my focus alongside whatever gigs I get.
So you're going to slow down a bit and let the others...
Well, yeah, whether it slows down for me or not probably doesn't matter. It's more just making sure I put the energy in for those guys.
Yeah.
Because I think they deserve it.
Yeah, I mean...
It's not their fault.
It's fucking... It's just got everyone...
Some of them have already had bookings because a lot of the festival bookings, it's at least like 6 months in advance, maybe 9 months in advance.
Yeah.
So people that I know here in Australia had a few tracks last year. They got picked up on, a Facebook group in Europe. They got booked for a couple of festivals in July. They're going to make their big European breakthrough, and then they might go live over there for a year or so, or they might have lots of gigs around Australia. And it just hasn't happened. So I think it's important for the growth of the scene that's the focus.
Yeah. Makes sense, the younger ones.
And some of them haven't played overseas. Yeah. So for me, I'm not a producer. I've played overseas 4 times already.
Yeah.
And if I keep sort of getting in the way, I don't think that's right. So I think it's important to, people have looked after me, you pay it forward.
Yeah. That's fair. If someone was going to get into DJing, let's pretend COVID didn't exist. What should they do and what shouldn't they do? Like, what have you learned that you're trying to instill in someone starting out?
Just practice for hours at home.
Yeah.
Like, as much as you want to jump in and get a gig straight away, hone in on your craft.
Yeah.
When I started, there was an expectation that your beat matching was basically perfect. If you had 2 errors in a 1 hour set, you'd be like, we like your CD, but there's a few errors. Try another one in a couple of months. Now it's not so much of an issue, but it's going to help you have a really clean product if you can go, I mix really well, I've got a heap of friends who are going to come watch me, I've got a good social media presence, because social media gains as big as the DJing itself.
Yeah.
So have a presence, and it's hard for some people who aren't naturally seen online.
Yeah.
But I think a combination of all those things, and people say, well, what sort of equipment should I get? Well, there's lots of smaller, there's like DJ controllers instead of like the separate CDJ players. So a lot of people just get the controllers, which only $1,500 or $2,000, as opposed to paying $3,000 for one CDJ, $3,000 for another one, and then $2,000 for a mixer. So you don't have to buy the flashiest equipment to start.
Yeah.
Although it is handy having some exposure to it before you play a gig, because it basically pioneers the industry standard.
Okay.
There are other brands like Denon and Allen and Heath mixers and things, but look, as long as you trust what you're doing and you're good to work with, as I said, and you bring something fresh.
Yeah.
Because like, there's events where I have seen either in Melbourne or in Sydney or even in Holland, it's like everybody basically plays, give or take, the same sort of stuff, and you've got 8 people playing the same stuff. I'm like, well, that's cool, but I'm either A, not going to go because there's no variety, or B, only go for an hour or two, or C, if I stay the whole time, like, look, it was good, but it's really repetitive. So try and stand out, whether it's, making a mashup, like, one of my mates made a song and he's like, I'm going to put the Get on the Beers vocal over the top. Well, 2 weeks later, you've got 10,000 plays on SoundCloud, so...
Yeah.
Just try and stand out.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the arts, that is a big thing.
But be authentic.
Yeah. It's a hard mix of like,
it's
stand
difficult.
out, be authentic, it's just like...
10 years ago when I was playing, I played like, one gig was trance, one gig was hardstyle, one gig was like techno, and people would say, Sam, when you're booked, we don't know what we're going to play, and we don't like that. I'm like, yeah, but I can play all of them. It's like, yeah, but these people play trance and these people play techno. We know you for hardstyle or hardcore. So stick to your lane. That's kind of important.
Yep.
Don't sort of cut in dribs and drabs. Like, don't dabble in things that you're not going to put your heart and soul into.
Yeah.
Like, I could, play house music, but there's plenty of people who love it and it's their life. What right do I have to come and cut in on that?
Yeah.
So, yes, stick in your lane, stick to what you know, but stick to what you know, but have the flexibility to, incorporate other elements to stand out. So, but just be authentic. That's the main thing. Like when I play a set, everyone's like, "That's not your normal style."
Yeah.
And the best thing is, my wife's like really encouraging. She's like, "We really like that, but it's not you.
Okay.
Do it for yourself to listen to in the car, but do this at the gig." And I'm really grateful to her for that.
Yeah, it's always nice to have someone set
She's
you
honest.
straight. Yeah.
She's like, I make mixes of trance for the car, and she said, it was really good, but there was that one mistake an hour ago. I'm like, yep, it was. Good pickup. Yeah. I'll try better next time.
Thanks, hon.
Nah. Love you, Chris.
I think that's it for us, mate.
No worries.
I think we've answered everything that I had in front of me. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much, Tait.
I have actually learnt a bit about DJing, and it's very interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. Next week, I have no idea who the fuck's on the show, but tune in, like and subscribe, all that jazz. Be authentic. I'm out. Thank you.
That's the end of the Tait Talks podcast. Yeah, 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 yeah. Motherfuckers.